Hello there and welcome. In the previous episode we finally finished working on our saving system. There are a few more things that we could have saved, but it's something you will have to do by yourself because you're going to have a completely different game and you need to understand the logic behind saving. So I'm not going to show you all of these different things. If you're having a hard time, you can ask me in the comments and I'm going to try to help you. In this episode, we're going to start working on the questing system. So every game should have some kind of questing system, main quests, side quests, something to give the player a purpose, a goal. Otherwise, he will just get bored and not play our game. So this quest system will take a few episodes because it involves different things, but we're going to start working on it in this episode. The first thing we want to do is create some kind of NPC that will give our player a quest. You can make it simple, you can create some kind of billboard and then the player will start the quest from the billboard, but we do want to learn how to create NPCs, so I'm going to show you how to do it in this episode. First, we need to find some kind of model that will be the model for our NPC. So you can use your own model and then just add the scripts that I'm going to show you. But I'm also going to assume you don't have any kind of model and I'm going to show you some free websites that you can use. So the first website is this Ready Player Me. It's just a website that lets you create some kind of avatar. You have different kinds of customizations and you can use it in your project. Now, according to their policy, you can't use it in commercial projects, so you won't be able to use it in your final game if you want to sell your game. But it's a good way to just test out your game, to make it a placeholder, and then when you want to release this game, you can simply replace this model with a model that is allowed for commercial use. So there are a lot of different customizations. Now there's not a lot of clothing, but it's enough for a placeholder. After you've done this, after you created your own character, you simply click on Enter Hub and it will generate this character for you. Then you want to download this character into your computer. So simply go over here and download Avatar as GLB file. Now, because this GLB file is not a standard file and you're not going to be able to do a lot of things with it, we are going to have to convert it into an FBX file. So an FBX file is a standard 3D model file and Unity supports it and other programs support it. So to do that, we're going to open up Blender. Now, maybe you don't know what Blender is, but it's basically a very popular 3D modeling software. And if you're into game development, you probably heard about this software and you probably used it. So the software is free and we actually don't need to do a lot. All we need to do is import this GLB file into this project and then export it as an FBX. And this will basically convert the file into a more supportive file. So first of all, when we start a new project, we will get this thing. We simply delete all of these elements. Then we go to File, Import, GLB. Then we're going to find our file. So as I told you, the only thing we need to do is export it into an FBX file. Now, you don't see the textures, but they do exist. You can go to Shading and it will show you the different textures. Now, sometimes you're going to have a problem with getting the textures for this model. So when you import this into Unity, you're not going to have any textures, so it's going to be a gray model. In order to get these textures, you simply go to File, External Data, and then you click on Unpack Resources. Then you select Use Files in Current Directory, and this will simply take all the textures from this character and it will put it inside a specific folder, and then you can take these textures and import them into Unity. Now, don't ask me why this happens. Maybe it's some kind of bug, maybe it's a problem with Unity, but when we're going to export it into an FBX file, it's not going to take the textures with it. That's why we need to do all of this. The location for these textures you can find inside the Blender main folder. So you can simply go to Search, Blender, Then you right click on Blender, open file location. Then you do this again, open file location, and you're going to find the main folder for Blender, and you will find a textures folder inside of it. And here you can find all the textures for this model. So remember this location because we're going to have to take all of these textures and import them into Unity as well. Now that we have the textures, we can export this as an FBX file. So we simply go to File, Export, and we select FBX, and we don't need to touch anything over here. We simply give it some kind of name and we save it somewhere on our computer. Now we have a model for our NPC, but we also want to create some animations for it. And we don't want to create manual animations using the Unity tool because it's going to take us a lot of time. Instead, we can use a website that creates animations easily and for free. And of course, I'm talking about Mixamo. So it's a website that you can use and it's free. So basically we have different animations and we have different characters. Now, because we already created a character, we're not going to use any of these, but of course you can use them. Now, you may not want to use them because they're very specific. You have different creatures over here. And with Player Ready Me, you can actually create a human looking character. So in order to use the character that we already created, we're going to just upload this character into Mixamo, and then we're going to download it again. In this way, it's going to be compatible with all of these different animations. So you simply go to Upload Character, and we're going to select our character. And the good thing about Mixamo is that it's going to take your model and it's going to automatically rig it and basically prepare it for being animated. So then we can click Next, and now we can see our model over here. And don't worry that you don't see the different textures. That's just because we have this issue, but in Unity, it's going to have the textures. So now all we need to do is get the animations. But before we get the animations, we also want to download this model after it was rigged. So we simply go to download and we are going to download this model again. Now it may seem confusing because we already had this model before, but it was not compatible with Mixamo. So now we need to download this again when it's already compatible with Mixamo. So we're simply going to select FBX for Unity, and we're going to use original pose, and we're going to download this again. So inside Unity, we're going to create a new folder just to be organized, and we're going to name it models. And inside, we're going to create another folder and name it NPC. And inside, we're going to create another folder and name it first NPC. So we can take this model that we downloaded from Mixamo and place it inside this folder. And if we drag it into our scene, we can see that this model has no textures, but we're going to fix it. The other thing we want to do is also download some animations for this model. So inside Mixamo, we simply click on the Animations tab, and then we look for some animations. We are going to use two different animations, so we can simply type in idle, and it will give us different idle animations. I'm going to just use this one. So we're going to download this idle animation. We simply click on it, and it will show our model with this animation. And then we simply click on download without skin because we already have the skin of our model. We select FBX for Unity, we can do it 60 frames, and over here we are not going to touch anything. And then we download this animation. Next, we're going to find some kind of talking animation. So this one is fine, and we're going to do the same thing. Download without skin, 60 frames, and download. Then we're going to take both of these animations and drag them inside Unity. So we have this base model without any animation, right? And we have two other animations. We have the talking animation and we have the idle animation. And if we click on our base model and we expand it, we can see that we have different materials inside, but all of these materials are without textures. So now we need to import the textures and place them on these materials, and then our model will actually have colors. So over here, let's create another folder and name it NPC textures. And then we're going to click on this model. We're going to click on rig. We're going to make it into a humanoid and we're going to apply. Then we're going to click on materials and we're going to click on extract materials. Then we're simply going to select this folder that we created. And inside we can find all of these materials. And then we go back to this folder with all of the textures and we simply copy all of them and drag them into the same folder. So you can find all the materials and all the textures in the same folder. And now we simply need to drag the appropriate textures into the different materials. And it's not hard because we already have all the names. It does take some work, but it's not something very difficult. So, for example, we have the skin over here, and we can also see the changes on our model. We have the skin, so we can find the base color 1, and we can see that it has the face. So we simply take it and drag it into this base map, and we can already see that it is applied to our model. Then we click on our body material, and we're going to drag this base color 2. Then we click on our hair and we're going to drag this base color 3, and it's very logical because the skin is this color and our hair is this red color. So we're going to drag it over here and we can see it applied on our character. And we're going to do the same thing with all of these parts of clothing. So we have our outfit bottom. So we're going to click on this bottom and we can see this texture over here. And with the different clothing, we also have normal maps. So normal maps simply give them some kind of more realistic texture. So we're going to take this one because this is also the bottom one, and we're going to drag it into the normal map. Now it's going to say that this texture is not imported as a normal map, so we're simply going to fix this. And we can see that there is this effect applied to the material, and now it actually looks like there is some kind of dent inside this dress. Let's see it over this top. So we simply go to the top, we drag the top base map, and now we drag this top normal and look at the model. Then we click on our footwear and the same thing. We go to the footwear, we drag this into the base map, and we drag the normal map. Then we also need to do it for the eyes. And that's all. Now another thing, we can see that it kind of shines. It kind of have this reflection. So we don't want to have this. So we simply click on our materials and we set the smoothness to 0. So we're going to do it with all of the materials. Now we can rename this prefab. Of course, let's also unpack it and rename it to be first NPC. And we're going to drag it back inside and make a prefab out of it. And let's delete it from the scene. Then we can go to our environment. Let's go to one of these rabbits. So everything is zoomed in. And now we can just find a location for this NPC. Let's place it somewhere at the beginning. Let's say over here under this tree. Let's make sure it stands on the floor. And the model is pretty small compared to our player. So let's also scale it to be about 2. You will have to see how it looks in your game, but 2 is about the size of our player. And next we want to add the animations to this model. because right now it just stands in this position. It's not moving, it's not breathing. So we want to make it feel like an actual human being. So for this, we're going to click on both of our animations. We will go to rig and we're going to change it to humanoid. And then instead of create from this model, we're going to choose the other model that we imported. So copy from other avatar, and we're going to select this NPC base that we already downloaded and apply. And we're going to do the same thing with the other animation. So humanoid, create from other avatar, and apply. Now that we did this, it will basically match these animations to this model. So when these animations will run, it will look natural and there will be no weird things going on with the model. So because we already applied this humanoid and this avatar, we can expand this animation. And then we have the actual animation inside, and we don't need this armature, we don't need anything else, we only need this animation. So we're going to press on Ctrl D, and it will duplicate this animation outside of this prefab. And we're going to do the same thing with the talking, so we simply select the animation, Ctrl D, and then we can delete both of these. So delete this one, because we're only going to use these actual animations. And now that we have these animations, we also want to set them on our model. So we need to create a controller, an animator controller for these animations. So we simply right click, create animator controller, and we're going to name it first NPC controller. And then we're going to click on our NPC and we're going to drag this into the controller slot. Now, if you don't have the animator window, you can simply go to Window, Animation, Animator, and you're going to find this window over here. So if we select our NPC, it will open this screen, and now we're simply going to drag both of these animations inside. And we want to make the idle animation to be the default one because we want the idle to always run. So it connected the talking as default. So we're just going to right click on this, set as layer default state, and this will be our default animation. Now we're not going to touch this talking at the moment, but we want to see that this idle animation is actually running. We do need to change another thing, so we simply click on our idle animation and we set the loop time because we want this animation to be looping. We don't want this to just play once. And now if we go into our scene and we actually play the game, we can see that this model is moving, so the idle animation is running. So we have our first NPC, but it's just standing there and it's not doing much. So we're going to click on it and we're going to add a box collider because we don't want to be able to just go through this character. So we're going to move it a bit up. And next we want to be able to interact with this NPC. So we basically want to approach this NPC, select it, and then click on him to be able to start a conversation. Now, this NPC doesn't have to give you a quest. It can just say something, it can guide the player, it can just give some information to the player, but it can also give him a quest, it can give him an item, whatever you decide. But first, the player needs to interact with this NPC. So we're going to create a script named NPC, and this script will sit on all of our NPCs. So we're going to try to make it generic and not something that will only be relevant for this first NPC. So if you remember, when we created the stones and the sticks and basically all the things that we want to interact with, we first wanted to check if the player is close enough, because we don't want to be able to start a conversation if the player is standing far away. We want to be able to start a conversation only if the player is somewhere nearby to this NPC. So we need to check this. So we're going to open our interactable object script, and we have this on trigger enter. So we're going to copy all of this and paste it inside our NPC script. And now we also need to create this boolean. So public bool player in range, and this boolean simply keeps track if the player is close to our NPC. And of course, to create this trigger area, we need to create another collider that will be the trigger area when the player enters it. So we're going to add another box collider. And this one will be trigger, so we're going to tick is trigger, and we're going to make it a bit bigger. So this will basically be the area the player has to enter in order to talk with our character. So I don't know if this is good enough, but we're going to fine tune it later. So now we can see that the player enters the zone, and we see at the bottom player in range. And if we exit this area, then the player is no longer in range. Next, we're going to open our selection manager, and this is the place we handle different interactions. We created this in the very beginning of our tutorial, and some things here can be changed. You know, I'm working on this tutorial for a long time, and I've also grown as a developer. So some things that I did back then are not things I'm going to do today. So we can actually make things work better, but we're not going to do this right now. Maybe in the future, we're going to change the code to be more efficient. But right now, let's just work with what we have. So over here, we have situations that we're interacting with pickable objects and when we want to chop a tree. So over here, we're going to create another situation when we want to interact with an NPC. So basically when the middle point of our screen hovers over the character. And then we're going to be able to left click to have a conversation. We're going to see some kind of text. So over here, we're going to add this code. So we're getting the selection transform, and this is basically the object that we're selecting with our raycast. So it can be a tree, it can be a stone or a stick, but it can also be our NPC. So we simply check if this object has an NPC script on it. And if it has, so if this will be true, and if the player is in range, then we're going to display this talk text, and the player will know that we can actually talk with the NPC. And if we're not going to hover over an NPC, then we're not going to see this talk. Another small adjustment that we need to do, just because of the way this script is constructed, we need to go over here at the bottom and we need to disable this thing. Otherwise, it's just going to disable our text each time we're not hovering over something that is interactable. So if it's not interactable, it's not going to show any text, and then it's not going to show this talk. So again, this is not the way I would do it today, but in another episode, I'm going to change all of this. But for now, let's just disable this so it will work. And now when we run the game and we enter into this area and we hover over the NPC, we can see this talk text. And if we hover over something else, we're not going to see it. And of course, if we exit this area, we're not going to see it because it's not logical to talk with the NPC if we're this far away. Next, we will open our NPC script and let's just organize this a bit. We're going to create another boolean that will keep track if our player is talking with this NPC at the moment. So public bool is talking with player. And then back in the selection manager, when we're actually hovering over an NPC, we also want to be able to start the conversation when we left click on our mouse. So if we're hovering over the NPC and the player sees this talk option, and then he presses on the left mouse button, and also he is not already talking with the NPC, then we're going to run a method that is named start conversation, and this method is going to be inside the NPC script. So let's create it. We can simply click here, generate method, and then inside the NPC we can find this method over here. So we're going to remove this and simply set is talking with player to be true. And we also want to print something just for debugging. Conversation started. So now when we approach the NPC and we left click, we can see at the bottom in the console, conversation started. Next, we want to create some kind of UI to actually display the conversation and the different options. So we're going to create an empty object and name it dialogue system. Then we're going to create a script on it with the same name. And it's going to be a singleton. So we can go to any other singleton, copy the awake, and copy this static part. And now it becomes a singleton, and we're going to be able to reference this dialog system from any part of our project. Then inside, we're going to create a canvas. And inside the canvas, we're going to create an image. And if we drag this game window over here, we can see the image over here. So let's just position it and give it some kind of styling. Inside, we're going to create a Text Mesh Pro. And then we're going to create some kind of background for this area. So another UI image. Make sure to position it behind the text. Then we want to create some kind of buttons that will be the options the player can choose. So inside the same image, UI button Text Mesh Pro. And we're going to just delete the text because we are going to set it from our script. Now we're going to duplicate this button and we're going to make one more. Of course, you can have more than 2 options. You can have 3 or 4 options and you simply need to adjust the code. In our case, we're going to only have 2 options. And we're going to rename these elements. Then inside the dialog system, we're going to have a reference for these buttons and for this dialog. And we will also have a reference to the canvas. Another thing that we want is a boolean that will keep track if our UI is opened or not. And now we need to drag all of these references. So the canvas goes into the canvas. Then back inside the dialog system, we're going to have two methods, one for opening the UI and one for closing the UI. So it's very simple. We simply display the UI and we set the boolean to be true. Then we are releasing the cursor because we want to be able to use the cursor to select the different options, and we make the cursor visible. And when we close the UI, we want to set it all to false. Back inside our NPC script, we want to add some code to the start conversation method. It made it into internal. Let's just make it public. So the way we're going to make this conversation is we're going to basically set different things into the UI, into the dialog text, and into the option buttons. But the way it's going to look right now is not the way it's going to look at the end. This is just something I want to do for now so we can finish this episode. But in the next episode, we're going to make it more generic so it will fit other NPCs as well. Because right now it's going to be kind of hard-coded. So we simply open the dialog UI, we put some kind of text for the NPC to say, we put some kind of option for our first button, and then if we click on this button, it will simply close the dialog and it will make this boolean to be false. So this is a very hard-coded way to make it. It's just going to be relevant for this specific NPC, but of course we don't want it to be this way because this script should go on all of our NPCs. But that's just for now. Then we also want to disable the movement of the player while this UI is opened. So inside our mouse movement script, we just add another condition. So if the dialog UI is opened, we don't want to be able to move the camera. Then inside the player movement, we also want to disable the movement, and we didn't care for this when we opened our inventory UI or our crafting UI because we did want to allow the player to walk around, but when the player is talking to an NPC and is about to get a quest, we don't want him to just walk away. So we're going to take all of this code inside the update. We're going to cut it, and we're going to place it into a new method and name it and then we're going to take this movement and simply call it inside the update. And then we're going to take all of this and surround it with an if statement. So now it will only move if the UI is not opened. Then we also need one more thing inside the selection manager. And let's disable the canvas. So now when we approach the NPC and we left click, it will open this menu and we cannot move, but we can move our mouse, and then when we press on buy, it will simply close it. And we have our first conversation, but of course we want to be able to receive a quest and then accept the quest, or maybe decline the quest, or just answer some questions. So we're going to continue with this in the next episode. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe if you're still not subscribed, please leave a like and see you next time.